Welcome to the Pod-Key summary of Fringe Season 2. This season of Fringe stops hinting at some vague threat out there, and finally turns the whole thing into an actual two-universe war. What makes it work is that the big sci-fi machinery never drifts too far from the really painful human stuff underneath it, especially Peter learning who he really is and what Walter did to him. It's also the season where the show seems to figure out its own personality. The standalone weirdness is still there, but now it feeds the mythology instead of stalling it. And by the end, the parallel universe isn't just a cool idea anymore. It's personal, invasive, and sitting right in Olivia's life. One of the smartest shifts here is that the conflict stops being abstract. Early on, the show is still dealing with clues, incursions, strange events, and the feeling that somebody is coming by the finale. That becomes a direct standoff between the prime universe and the parallel one. That lines up with the producer's idea that Season 1 was about identifying an enemy, and Season 2 was about getting to know that enemy. And once you actually spend time in the alternate world, the whole story gets richer, because it's not just a monster closet on the other side of reality. The shapeshifters help make that threat concrete. These Mercury-based human-machine hybrids, working with Thomas Jerome Newton, aren't there just to look creepy, though they do manage that just fine. They're the operational arm of an invasion, moving people and objects between universes and pushing toward a plan that uses Peter's biology to power a device that could wipe out the prime universe. The emotional core of the season is Peter, and more specifically the truth of where Peter came from. Walter crossed into the other universe to save a dying boy, saved him from drowning, and then made the catastrophic choice to keep him. That choice is both deeply loving and deeply unforgivable, which is exactly why it lands so hard. Walter isn't framed as some cartoon mad scientist here. He's a father who couldn't bear the loss in front of him, and in giving in to that love, he tears open damage that spreads across two worlds. September's warning that the boy must live gives the whole thing a mythic charge, but the show keeps it grounded in betrayal. When Peter learns the truth, it doesn't just answer a mystery. It reorders his whole identity and redefines his relationship with Walter. This is also where Fringe gets much more confident about slowing down just enough to let the characters mature. Walter keeps moving toward a kind of fragile emancipation. Peter grows into a more active and heroic role, and Olivia becomes more secure in her abilities and in her place on the team. That matters because the series had a first-season habit of finding an intriguing idea and then burning through it too quickly. Here, the writers deliberately leave some questions open, but not in that annoying string-you-along way. Their rule was basically that answers should create consequences, not just more fog. That's where the so-called mythalone approach comes in. You still get an episode with its own case and its own hook, but it's also advancing the larger story in a meaningful way. It's a neat balancing act, and it's probably the reason the season feels more cohesive without becoming homework. Another big reason the season works is that the parallel universe isn't treated like a lazy evil twin version of ours. It's damaged, yes, but it's damaged in part because of Walter's original crossing back in 1985. That world is dealing with singularities and institutional paranoia, and its own Fringe division makes brutal choices, including using amber-like quarantine material, even when innocent people are trapped inside. So their fear is real, their methods are compromised, and suddenly both sides have reasons and both sides have blood on their hands. Even the visual details help sell that. You've got a standing World Trade Center, a destroyed White House, a green Statue of Liberty, Zeppelins floating around. It doesn't feel like a generic copy. It feels like history took a different set of turns and left behind a world people actually live in. Then the finale takes all those themes about identity and makes them brutally intimate. Olivia helps the team escape back home, except the Olivia who returns isn't Olivia, it's faux-Olivia, while the real Olivia is trapped over there with Walter Nate. That's such a good escalation, because the parallel universe no longer exists at a safe, dramatic distance. It's inside the group now. It can move through their relationships, their trust, their routines, all the ordinary places where a secret can do the most damage. And the whole season has been building toward that with doubles everywhere. Peter is really the other universe's son. Walter Nate is his biological father. Charlie comes back as a counterpart, Olivia occupies Olivia's place. The show keeps asking whether identity comes from blood, memory, experience, or choice, and it does it through plot instead of speeches. William Bell's final act fits that same emotional logic. He sacrifices himself to give Walter, Peter, and Olivia the energy they need to return home. And his reconciliation with Walter closes part of their long conflict at the cost of his life. Leonard Nimoy's return really does play like a swan song, not a cameo waved in for applause. Behind the scenes, this was a season of change too. Production moved from New York to Vancouver after the tax incentives disappeared, and that came with a largely new writing and production staff, even with Abrams, Roberto Orci, Alex Kurtzman, and the rest of the core producers still involved. What's impressive is that the show responds to those pressures by getting weirder in productive ways. Fox required the musical episode Brown Betty for its Fox Rocks campaign, which could have been a total headache. Instead, the producers turned it into a way of processing Walter's grief and guilt after Peter learns the truth and leaves. That kind of flexibility becomes part of the season's identity. Between Brown Betty, the mythalone structure, and the alternate history world building, Fringe is trying to stay accessible as a network drama while also becoming much more experimental science fiction. That's a hard mix to pull off, and this is the year it starts pulling it off. Commercially, the season didn't exactly roar. It averaged 6.252 million viewers with a 2.3 rating among adults. 18 to 49, down a lot from the first season's 9.96 million average. And the finale brought in 5.68 million viewers. It finished 79th among network shows, which is not the neighborhood where TV executives usually send thank you notes. Critically, though, the story was much brighter. A lot of reviews said the first half could feel uneven, or a little too committed to the accessible case of the weak side of the formula. But the second half won people over by tying all that weirdness to emotional consequences. Episodes like Peter, White Tulip, Brown Betty, and Over There kept coming up as proof that the series had found its creative identity. Even with middling ratings, it got a full season renewal, landed on a bunch of 2010 Best of TV lists, and picked up Saturn Awards for Anna Torv and Leonard Nimoy, even while suffering a pretty glaring Emmy snub in the major categories. What sticks with this season is how neatly it fuses giant mythology with very ordinary human damage. Two universes are at war, but the wound at the center of it is still one father making one impossible, awful choice. And once Fringe figures that out, the whole show snaps into focus. Weird science is great, but weird science with guilt, love, doubles, and zeppelins is a much better deal. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.